So, hello and welcome to the very first ITESOFT Insider View. Today we're going to be taking a look at a series of articles that were recently published by Raconteur, looking at the finance function, looking at new technology, and looking at the future of the workplace as well, and why that's an important element for people to be considering.
So I'm Rory Coleman-Smith.
I'm John Stoffold.
And let's just quickly go over the headlines of the articles that we're going to be talking about. So starting off, we're going to be talking about how AI is driving CFO dynamism. Then we've got man, machine and money, why CFOs should embrace RPA and AI. And then, is 5G the key to digital transformation? And lastly, keeping millennials connected to their aspirations.
So starting with the very first article, probably the best place to start this our first attempt at a little bit of vlogging. So CFOs and being more dynamic, an interesting article, some really good takeaways from this. Anything there that sort of stood out for you, Rory?
Well, yes, there was one quote, excuse me, from Carol Murphy, Head of Business Transformation Services at Capgemini.
Okay.
She says, CFOs are becoming increasingly attuned to the digital environment and are leveraging that understanding to lead efforts to transform the business, improve productivity, drive strategy, and innovate in the face of competitive disruption with technologies such as AI and RPA.
Okay, so from that, I suppose, what's your thoughts on this? You know, it's interesting. That's from Capgemini. Obviously, everybody knows these guys. They're really in tune when it comes to business transformation, when it comes to new technologies. You know, we've spoken a lot about RPA and AI and how important this is to the finance function. But for CFOs, what's your thoughts on that?
So I guess my takeaway from this is that tools like AI and RPA are taking care of the menial tasks for the people underneath the CFO, which is then gathering data so the CFO can see more of what's going on, but also the CFO can spread its wings a little bit, do a few other bits other than chasing people for reports and things like that, because it all comes up for them.
Right, so freeing them up basically.
Yeah.
No longer just being in charge of the purse strings and the company credit cards, and no longer chasing people down to, as you said there, to get reports, to get insight into what's actually going on with the spend. They're able to look at it from a different angle maybe, and able to actually look at their business processes and their business models and see, is there actually a way that we can generate revenue? Is there a way that we can boost the productivity of the back office functions? Are there ways that we can engage with third parties, suppliers, or wider community, or even just wider within the business to implement best practices, to improve the speed at which we're working, the speed at which we're delivering?
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, there's two technologies that's been talked about here.
Yeah.
AI and RPA, and they are, whilst they're intrinsically linked because of the requirement to get data to deliver it into an artificial intelligence solution to get the benefit from that, they are also two really different pieces of technology. They've got different use cases, they've got different benefits, different deliveries. So on RPA, you know, there's accounts payable automation is the obvious, the first sort of example that comes to my mind. Obviously, we're in that space, so it should naturally go towards that. But for yourself with RPA, I mean, what's the reality of that like at this stage for organisations, not just for the CFOs and the benefits it generates them, but actually, and you've already mentioned, for those people who are working in the departments who are trying to make use of this technology, you know, how does RPA fit into that model?
Right, so RPA, robotic process automation, is in effect a piece of software that can interact with other pieces of software and do things that a person would usually do. Keying in invoices, exactly, coding them and clicking buttons, basically clicking buttons and typing things in. For a finance function, it's imperative, really. Use is for invoices, but on a broader scale, you can utilize RPA. If you had a BPM tool, you could then create an RPA application to do almost anything. just by making our workflow like an old diagram.
Okay, yeah. And one of the, I mean, you mentioned that on the RPA, you can get it to do anything. One of our partners has got a little toolkit that automatically logs into portals, online services, and pulls back invoices. So you think your utility bills now, quite often you have to log in to your account to to pull back your mobile phone bill, your water bill, your electric bill, and that kind of thing. Now for businesses, that can be quite a time consuming task. If they've got multiples of these accounts and they've got different passwords and login details for every single one, and they've got to pull the invoices back to then process them. Actually, again, that's another point where these RPA tools can really come into their own, is in just sheer time saving.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one way that we could think of this in a sort of non-business way to make it sort of relate to everyday people, if you think about, I don't know if anybody's seen the Chinese social media like factories where they've got phones and phones and phones, right? And but the phones are all running an RPA application, which is pressing things and liking posts and commenting and stuff like that.
Yep.
So that's just another example of RPA, I guess.
And out there in the social world as well.
Exactly.
And obviously the key with RPA is it's carrying out those tasks on behalf of a human. So that person isn't sat there physically doing what's really quite mundane, routine, boring tasks. Copying data from a piece of paper into an ERP or whatever it may be. It's dry, it's tedious, it's not energetic, it's not engaging, and then we go with the dynamic element as well. There's none of that in play. You've got people sat there doing things that frankly they don't need to be doing. What it does though is it gives you far more data as well. It's higher quality data, it's got less errors, less issues, it's generally faster at collecting that data, which can then be transferred through and into AI solutions, which is obviously the other side of this, where you're looking actually then at machines running algorithms to determine what's going well or not.
Yep.
And in some cases even to make recommendations on changes that you could implement as an organisation to deliver more benefit. It may be looking at how quickly you're paying your various suppliers, comparing that against the contractual agreements that you had with them, flagging up instances where the payments aren't happening on time. But the clever bit about this one is it's also then looking at why, and it's giving you back reasons as to why this isn't happening. Actually, the reason this isn't happening is because this supplier is never quoting their purchase order number, and actually that's something that you need to take up with them in order to improve that process. And it's using vast amounts of volume to come back out with some recommendations and suggestions and as to what you can do. And I think what's important is that for people to remember that it's not replacing humans in these processes. All it is doing is augmenting them, and it's allowing them to focus on far more, and it's that horrible phrase, higher value added tasks. It's such a terrible phrase, but it's a genuine scenario where that's the case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so then I guess in part of that, it's creating accountability for a CFO to be able to see lots of payments aren't going through. Is that because of someone in accounts payable? Is that because of the suppliers? Is it because of the system?
Yep. No, I completely agree with you there. So moving on to the second one, and we're still in the same thing with RPA and AI with this one, and looking at I love the title, Man, Machine and Money. I think that's a great combination, and conjures up these sort of images of cyborgs or cyborg bank tellers or something, which is just peculiar. But actually, I think this is a bit different. And this was an interview with our MD, Nick Dunnett, and this was looking at this from the ITESOFT perspective and what we've established over time. 30 odd years of working in this industry space and dealing with organisations, how the technology has progressed, but how that's really, really important. And again, for the CFO, why they should be embracing this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it all sort of boils down to having happy staff, having a productive team, and being able to save money at the end of it. The title, as you said, Man, Machine and Money. You think machines shouldn't care about money, but when they're programmed by man, of course they do.
Yeah, and the other side of this one as well is it's looking at the fact that CFOs traditionally or finance professionals have been engaged with technology for forever. You know, they've always been involved and engaged with that. And you think back, okay, very tongue in cheek, but you're going from the abacus to the calculator to the MS DOS, and the old BBC computers. And going through that whole sorry, for those of us that are old enough to remember those old early machines that we used with the black screens with the green text on, there was none of this full colour and all the rest of it. But people embraced this technology because they realised that it was really, really useful and it allowed them to deliver their roles faster. But the other side of that is the way that technology is going now, we've alluded to this already, is it's freeing up time for people to focus elsewhere. And for the CFOs, what that's actually allowing them to do is to become far more involved in change management, far more involved in managing the people rather than managing the money.
Definitely. Yeah, the CFOs are there for a reason. They've worked their way up through the ranks. They do know what's going on below them, so they know how it should be done.
Yeah.
So if they have time to get involved in planning the processes, then they should be optimal.
Yeah, and then that people element, the CFO now. Yeah. And I think this is alluded to elsewhere in the articles, they're no longer, and as I've already said, they're no longer the holders of the purse strings and the company credit card and that kind of thing. And they're far more important in an organisation now, and they're expected to be far more involved in a far broader way within businesses. They are expected to be involved in change management, as I've mentioned. They're expected to be involved in managing these departments. They're expected to be involved in communication with the CEOs, with the CMOs, and getting best practices across the whole organisation and allowing that business to be far more disruptive in their own industry. Obviously the aim is to take more of a market share, but for the CFO, that's a real change, and it's using robotics to make them less robotic. It's removing those manual tasks, that 50% of their workload that, let's be honest, they don't physically have to do anymore with technology. Technology can do that. They can go away and they can be spending that time elsewhere. The blue sky thinking, if you like.
Yes, exactly. And as we'll talk about a little bit later on, embracing these technologies is going to be a great way for them to effectively recruit younger people as well into the ranks.
But also to engage.
Yes.
To engage with them as well. You've got to be able to recruit them in, and as you say, we're going to come on to that one, but you've got to be able to engage with them, and you've got to be able to not be sat in an office, glued to a computer screen, head down. I'm an accountant and I'm going to work with numbers. It's far more than that. It's far more personable than that. But it's freeing them up to do that, and that's the key. I don't think that anybody really wants to spend all day, every day, not talking to anybody else or glued to, doors shut and all the rest of it. I think people like to engage. I think if you can free up the time to do that, then that's a benefit.
Definitely. Cool.
On to number 3, and this time we're looking forward a little bit. This is something that's coming rather than something that's actually here at the moment.
Yeah, I know you're pretty passionate about how 5G is going to sort of transform society as a whole. But looking at businesses, everything's going to be much faster.
Yeah, in a nutshell. And who doesn't like things that are faster?
Exactly.
Who doesn't like technology that's faster? Who doesn't like data that can be moved from one place to another far more quickly? We have the battles ourselves, and everybody does, because internet, broadband, 4G can only connect to a certain speed. Even if you are paying for the most premium of services, there's still a latency there. There's still a lag, a delay in the transfer of information. And yes, you can get that down quite well, but you can't make it instantaneous. And that's where 5G comes in. The expectation that's put on this is that it will be up to 100 times faster than our current networks are able to manage. You've mentioned societal impact on that. Of course there is, and that's touched on in the article, in the Raconteur article as well. How smart vehicles will be able to communicate with each other and with the traffic lights and with the pedestrian crossing and everything else that goes with that. But you've mentioned it there for businesses, that speed at which you can transfer information, that you can access information, and the fact that you can do it anywhere is phenomenally important and is going to make a big change. And especially when and again, we're going to look at this shortly, but especially when you take into count the fact that the next generations of people coming through are going to expect that kind of flexibility.
Yeah, it's like when you go and look at a new flat or a house, you see if you've got phone signal, or you want to know what the best broadband speed is.
Yeah,
you know, if you're looking for a new job, have they got 5G? You know, can I work from home instantaneously?
Yeah. Have they got the devices that can connect to
exactly.
it? Okay, you know, and on that basis, whilst even 5G itself isn't expected really to hit the markets properly until the back end of this year, probably into next year, you know, a lot of the manufacturers, their devices, they're not ready for them now. They're maybe just coming out with their 5G ready handsets and that kind of thing. But for companies, that's going to require an investment.
Yeah.
And that's where I think for businesses, we may see a slight delay before they really take this up.
Sure.
The people that do are the people that are going to absolutely smash it, though.
Mm-hmm.
Those early adopters are the ones that are going to be so far ahead of the crowd that by the time the crowd bothers going down that route, they're going to have some serious catching up to do. It's that whole Amazon with a bookstore thing, isn't it? You know,
it's kind of the same, I guess, now we're seeing with companies that have invested in RPA and Accounts Payable.
Yep.
Now, yes, it's more available now and cheaper than ever, but they've wasted a load of time. They could have been gaining benefits, and they could have paid for the solution themselves.
Oh, easily. With anything like this, you know, it's okay. With some of the earlier technologies, you know, the early adopters, they did get burnt, and I think that's always a risk that's associated. But when you're looking at something like the connection speeds via internet, I think that's subtly different. You're not looking at a piece of hardware necessarily.
Yeah.
You're looking at your connection speeds to the cloud, and as we know, ERPs, they're all moving to the cloud. AP automation solutions, we're all moving them to the cloud.
Yep.
So actually the speed that you can connect to these is really, really important.
Mm-hmm.
Removing that latency, removing that lag is a vital element to the success of that product and to the real benefits that you can gain from it. Great, you've invested in the latest RPA and AI toolkit to automate your accounts payable process. It's in the cloud. You've saved all your money on servers and all the rest of it. And then you're connecting to it through, well, it's not dial-up like I used to remember it. It's a lot faster than that. But nonetheless, if you're not going to invest into that 5G, if you're not going to consider that, you're still using dial-up today, even though broadband exists.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so on to the last article here. Keeping millennials connected to their aspirations. So I think the gist of this article is using technologies like RPA and AI, automating menial, manual, boring tasks in the workplace is really beneficial for people who are more akin to want to make a difference to society, community on a whole at a larger level than picking up a piece of paper, typing in some information, and then putting it in.
Well, who wants to pick up the piece of paper if you're of that age bracket anyway? You know, saving the environment and all the rest of it. But seriously, and actually, I mean, this is your generation.
Yeah.
You know, I look at this from somebody who's of the Gen X, and we're looking down across this and saying, okay, this is actually really, really important. This is a really important thing that's going to change. It's going to change the workplaces. I think by about next year, maybe the year after, about 30% of employees in the workplace are expected to be of the millennial age bracket. Baby boomers will be about 6% by that point, and they're currently the one of the dominant workforce elements. So for you, I mean, I read the article and I thought, this hits the nail on the head. And as you know, I've built webinars around this as well, and other talks around this. But for you as a millennial and in the workplace, do you find that actually this technology, access to technology, is influential in your decisions? Do you find that it actually does free you up?
Definitely. I mean, growing up with technology expanding at a rate that it has been, going from the late 90s through terrible old Nokia handsets all the way.
You really remember those? Yeah.
All the way through to iPhones and what they are today. I guess just the knowledge that things can be automated and that technology is available to do stuff. I mean, there's an app for everything almost.
Yep.
And there has been for a while now. So if I'm at work and I've got a job to do, and I think there's a bit of software that can either do it for me or will help me do it, then yeah, it's definitely something that I'm gonna champion for, and it's gonna sort of affect me, I guess, in a negative way if I come up to a barrier. If I can explain that there's definitely a 100% benefit from getting this technology, and then someone turns around and says no, then I might start picking up my saddlebag and kicking it elsewhere.
As long as there's an understanding on why the no is, though.
Oh, definitely.
There's always a flex in that. And the other side of the coin here, though, and we've touched on this one already, and it's about that recruitment and retaining, the youngest talent that's coming into the system now, and in that instance, we're looking at Gen Z as well. Millennials, they've Uberized everything. Food, taxis, everything. Amazon have smashed barriers and. The speed of that, the way in which we want to work, and again 5G helps with this. That's that speed element, it's that instant communication, it's that instant engagement and development. But as you've got that and you've got the time then to look at elsewhere, as you say, this is something that you can then be feeding back into community. It's something that you can be feeding back into the broader business. It's something that you can invest then in your education, your knowledge, and growing your own futures. And I think for a lot of the younger generations coming into the workplace right now, actually that's what's most important. Yes, we all need a salary because we all want to have a house, we all want to have that glass of wine or that nice meal or whatever it may be, but actually learning and education and being able to do that in the working environment becomes so important in order to attract and retain these younger generations of employees.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I mean, I've always been looking for ways to grow and learn as a person and within my environment and within my team. So yeah, I definitely agree with that point. So I mean, from my experience, where I've always tried to find a problem, well, not find a problem, but a problem comes to me
and find a solution.
But
see a problem.
Yes, exactly.
Because quite often these aren't things that are obvious to people that are in the working environment who have maybe been doing it this way for a very long time. Yeah. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Can't see the wood for the trees.
Yeah, all those wonderful things that you can throw around. But actually sometimes somebody with a fresh sight on something can come in. Anyway, sorry.
Definitely, saying. Yeah. So, I mean, as I said earlier, if I know I can do something with technology and it's not being done, I want to help out. I want to improve that experience. So in one of my previous roles, working as like an admin assistant at a local authority, one of the main tasks was filing. So we had a big filing cabinet that was about 5 meters long, and you had to wind it all the way up, and it was great. I mean, in theory, it kind of works, but when it's so full, it's busting at the edges. Files are being put on top in the wrong place. And I was just sort of thinking, well, we could digitalize this. Like, we have scanners, we have hard drives or servers, and I think explaining to a lot of the team was quite difficult because there was a lot of sort of struggle with them having to change the way they're doing things. But I mean, they were always focusing on negatives in the process. So I mean, it was always, oh, this is going to take too long to do, let's just keep going this way. It's not good.
No.
But what if the technology fails? Well, what if there's a fire? There's only one backup at the moment. If we put it in the server, there's 3 backups somewhere else, and that was how it was. But it wasn't even I didn't need to buy any new technology for this even.
Yeah.
It wasn't like I had to go on a whole procurement cycle and acquire expensive solution for sorting out files. I was just going to scan things in and then put them in a folder, which we were doing anyway with incoming emails, although other people were also printing them out as well as saving them, just so they're all in the same place.
But what was the buy-in then from the senior management? Because obviously we've touched on CFOs and needing to be far more dynamic, which is about engaging with the business, it's about engaging with people, and it's about engaging with technology. It's about engaging with RPA and AI. So from our market space, that's really important that these at the top level that they understand the benefits, but they're also willing to engage with them, and not just on a go and buy it, an actual engagement in educating and explaining and in themselves understanding things. So in that scenario, did you have senior management support with this, or did they even have a bit of a fear of this change process?
So the way it felt to me was that my department, the head of my department, or my team even, she was encouraging, but I think it was kind of like you're barking up the wrong tree kind of thing. Like, you can try, people have tried, we'll try, give it a go. You got a bit of free time, go for it. So then I went one up, and I had a meeting with the head of the whole service, I guess, and he said, yeah, that's great, let's do it, we want to do it, so you want to do it, that's great, you can champion this, we want to get, he had lots of plans, he was like, we're going to get iPads and things like that. I didn't think that was going to happen, but so then I went up a stage higher than him, and I met up with like chief execs and things like that, and they were like, yes, we've been trying to push this for years, no one's wanted to do it, so let's make an example, let's do it, can you help? So then it felt to me like they were getting a lot of back talk as well, and because they didn't know enough about the processes, they couldn't just say, this is how we're doing it now, do it. And I think that was the way that it was felt in the department as well, was that they didn't know what they were doing. So how can they tell us what to do? When in reality, they should have just...
The chances are a lot of them probably did know what was going on. They probably had been through that process at some stage in their careers. And you've already suggested here that, a lot of CFOs, it's not people walking out of university and landing that as a role.
No.
These are people who have very often have been in the business, who have delivered on that boots on the ground level, and have actually worked their way up through their career. Yes, of course, they've gone through the exams and the qualifications and everything else you have to do, but they've still got that understanding. So I suppose if you, maybe in that example, if you had people who were maybe more willing to come back down the ladder and engage, actually they may have found that there was an easier way around this problem. Or maybe more buy-in to the solution rather than necessarily an easier way around the problem.
Definitely. And the worst part of it all was you hired me before I could finish it. So I don't know what happened.
Well, you'll have to find out. You have to give them a call and find out what they got up to.
Exactly.
It'd be interesting to know what the end of that tale is.
It would,
Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think that's probably us for today. Thank you very much for joining us. This was our very first insider view. We hope it's been of interest. The articles will be available on the website. We're going to be releasing some other content around these as well. There's going to be a slide deck. There's going to be an infographic. We hope that you enjoy the content, that you can get some really good thoughts out of this, and that it can help you understand what's happening out there in the marketplace and why it's so important that not just for CFOs but throughout the finance function, people are engaging with what's happening. They're looking at what's coming with future generations of employees, with future technologies, with technologies that are out there right now that they could be making use of. Please do download the documents, and please do reach out to us if you've got any thoughts, any questions, or even any suggestions. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks with another Insider View.
Yeah, excellent. Cheers, guys.
Cheers all.
Thanks.